From Eyewitness News, this is Newsmakers.
The blaring opposition outside did not stop the controversial toll proposal from passing inside. Governor Gina Raimondo's plan to fund bridge repairs by tolling large commercial trucks is now law. This week on Newsmakers, the roadworks debate and a look at what happens next. Our guest on the first half, the voice of the opposition with Rhode Island Job Lot CEO Marc Perlman, and on the second half, the voice of support with Rhode Island Commerce Secretary Stefan Pryor.
Welcome to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. Joining me on the program, as always, WPRI.com reporter Ted Nesi. Marc Perlman, CEO of Job Lot, thank you very much for joining us today on the program. Let's start with the bill signing last night. It was signed. It's a bill you've been fighting against. You've testified up at the State House, and I'm just wondering, as it happened, what your reaction was.
You know, I expected that the governor and the speaker had the appropriate amount of votes. I thought that my responsibility was to share information with, my fellow citizens and explain why I feel that this is poor legislation.
So there's been some talk of a lawsuit questioning the constitutionality of the roadworks bill. Do you support taking this to court?
It's not a question of whether or not I support taking this to court. There are those that feel that they're obligated to take this to court, and they will. This has never been as much a political issue for me as an economic issue for me. Rhode Island is pretty much 48th, 49th, or 50th position in anybody's study, whether it's the Wall Street Journal, whether it's Forbes. We have a horrible standing in the business community, and it would be appropriate if we moved a little bit closer to the center. And I can't imagine how anybody looking at this legislation is going to feel that the business community is going to see this as more business friendly or less business friendly.
For the people that didn't see your testimony, tell us what you calculated or what you think the impact to the Ocean State Job Lot's bottom line is going to be as a result of this legislation.
Well, when we first testified, we indicated that we believed that it would cost us $1 million a year. After receiving much more accurate information from the Speaker's office the other day, we gave it to our logistics people. We factored in our expected growth, and we came up with $9 or $10 million over the 10 years that that will be obligated to pay these tolls. And so it turns out that our numbers that we were originally estimating have now bearing fruit. $9 to $10 million will be the effect on my business.
To go back briefly to the lawsuit question, have you had any talks, or are you aware? I know it's not necessarily that Job Lot will be the plaintiff in the lawsuit, but the trucking industry is talking about it, of how quickly legal action might be taken by folks in the trucking industry, and when we'll see that?
You're getting a little above my pay grade here, but the real point is that the governor promised us something that was fair. The governor promised us not to make us an outlier, and the governor promised that this would create a lot of jobs. And being that nobody was against improving the bridges and roads, fixing them up, I don't understand why any discussion of jobs is part of this discussion, because everybody's in favor of fixing the roads and bridges. In terms of fairness, does anybody believe that only heavy trucks cause this problem? Because if heavy trucks cause this problem, why isn't Montana in last place? How about Hawaii, New York, New Jersey? How are we in last place? And my answer, and I believe the governor knows it, I believe the speaker knows it, I believe that everybody in the House and Senate knows it, but most importantly, I believe that every citizen in our state knows that we've had a Department of Transportation that hasn't performed their responsibility in an appropriate fashion. Their maintenance policies have been just abominable, and so we're left with this problem. And I know that the governor the governor's a new governor, the speaker's a new speaker. They didn't cause the problem. They have the responsibility to fix the problem. So, I don't relish the fact that they have to make tough choices, but they chose to run for those positions, and it's their responsibility. But assigning all the responsibility to one classification of trucks, that defies logic. Even their own testimony was that heavy trucks create 70% of the problem. Well, if they create 70% of the problem, why should they be responsible for 100% of the solution?
If I understand you right, having heard your testimony, when you said the governor promised us efforts to make it fair, the old version of legislation, not the final one, had a significant amount of incentives for the trucking industry to offset tolls. That was dropped from the final version due to legal concerns, apparently, about including that. There is a lot of talk, as you know, Marc, at the State House about a new separate bill coming forward with different incentives for the industry. You've been talking to state leaders. What's your sense? Are they going to do something that will make you whole, as you saw you would be under the old bill?
I know that I've been promised by the governor. I know that I've been promised by the speaker. And they both said, let's get the first part out of the way, and then we'll figure out how we can support the Rhode Island truckers. You know, I think I take everybody at their word. I think that this is quite a challenge. They have to thread a needle because they have to do this legally. Now, one idea that I suggest that they consider is that if they put a limit on the amount of tolling that any one truck could take on over the course of the year, that would assist Rhode Island trucks. Because trucks like mine and trucks like every other Rhode Island trucking company are constantly going in and out of these tolls. Whereas somebody coming up from Alabama or Texas or Maryland going up to Maine, they're going to come through these tolls infrequently. So that's one possible solution. I'm sure that there are quite a few, and I'm sure that this, but at least that this would pass muster in terms of everybody treated the same. There's a limit. We have a limit on $20 going one way. We have a limit of $40 in any 24-hour period. Why not consider a limit on the total amount that a trailer could incur over the course of a year?
We're speaking with Marc Perlman. He's the CEO of the Ocean State Job Lot. Marc, I want to ask you a couple questions about now that the bill is law, how you plan to adjust, if at all. So we talked a little bit about the class of trucks that are going to be facing the tolls, and just to put it in layman speak, it's tractor trailers. It's the one hauling a trailer. Do you plan at all at assessing your fleet to get it below the type of trucks that would be tolled?
Well, we might be able to make a few adjustments inside of the state of Rhode Island. However, it's important for all of our citizens to understand that although Job Lot was born in Rhode Island, 90% of our business is now done outside of Rhode Island. We'll probably have sales in and around $2/3 billion this year. And so if we recognize, as an example, we purchased 300 tractor trailer loads of sunflower seed from the Dakotas. So now let's imagine that a trucker is going to bring some seed into my warehouse. Well, they're going to pay a toll. When the truck leaves, they're going to pay a toll. Now 90% of that seed is going to be sold outside of Rhode Island. So 270 tractor trailer loads are going to be loaded in my warehouse, pay a third toll going out to New Hampshire or New Jersey, and then a fourth toll when the truck comes back. Sure seems like a lot of tolling to me.
Do you anticipate layoffs at your company as a result of this legislation?
No, and I've sent a letter out to my employees and have assured all my associates that this is not going to affect their jobs. But it's sure going to affect me, because my job every year is to give my associates a raise. And we've done that for 38 straight years. So during House testimony, I learned and was rather shocked that people in Rhode Island are earning less money today than they've been earning in years past. And that's not true in my company. And I don't see how putting $9–10 million worth of fees on our back is going to help me give my people a raise or help me continue the philanthropy that we're always engaged in the communities in which we operate.
You made a big splash last weekend when Job Lot said your proposed $50 million warehouse expansion was on hold due to the tolls. The toll bill is now law. So what's the plan moving forward with that project, or not moving forward from Job Lot's view?
People that were listening carefully, and I know a lot of people have rephrased my words, but my testimony, my comments to the governor, my comments to the speaker have always been consistent. And what we said was that businesses need data to proceed, and we didn't have appropriate data. There wasn't clarification on what the actual costs of this was going to be, and it wouldn't be prudent for us to proceed without this proper information. Now, I've told all my associates, and I've told the governor, and I've told the speaker that it's our intent to build this warehouse, not because it's the best place to build it. It's not. My consultants have advised me we could save $4 to $5 million if we opened up this warehouse in Pennsylvania. And I said to them, Rhode Island has treated us well. This is where we've educated our kids. This is where we live. We're going to put the warehouse here. And so my reward for giving up $4 or $5 million was to have an additional burden thrown on my shoulders. Now, the speaker and the governor have promised that not just for Job Lot, and I'm speaking for my own company, of course, but I have a lot of concern for the trucking, logistics, and warehouse industry in our state. And this is going to hurt this industry badly. And we can shoulder our share of the problem if the governor gives us some relief, because we're being asked to shoulder the entire problem.
And I believe you've confirmed you're going before the Commerce RI Board to seek incentives to help offset the cost of that warehouse project. Can you provide any visibility on how much you've applied for?
I'm not exactly sure. I'm sure the Commerce Secretary is more on top of that. But it's important to recognize that we're responsible to create jobs. And one of the things that I actually like about this particular legislation is if we don't deliver on the jobs that we're promising, that we owe the money back. I think that's great.
This is, just to be clear to folks, that's not in the toll bill, that's in some of the economic incentives from last year. Yeah.
Job Lot hasn't asked for anything. This is something that our government has proposed, and anybody in the state is able to apply, and we have. It's not an area that I'm particularly involved in. My chief financial officer has been responsible for those.
In retrospect, is there anything you think the trucking industry should have done differently in the last 9 months in this fight, or do you think the industry made the best attempt it could to head this off?
Nobody ever asked me for my opinion, when this legislation was being crafted. I'm sure that I could have made some suggestions. I mean, not unnecessary to take my suggestions, but we know a lot about this industry, and I don't understand why we were excluded. The governor is fast to point out that trucks are paying tolls everywhere else. Why would we be upset about paying tolls in Rhode Island? What she fails to tell everybody is that there is no state in the United States that is taxing large trucks at the exclusion of every other motor vehicle. So we are going to be an outlier. 49 states going to do it one way. Rhode Island's going to do it another way. So are we smarter than everybody else, or is everybody smarter than us? And if we're going to force Connecticut, Massachusetts, and other states to pay for part of our problem, and that's what was bragged about by everybody. Why should we accept the RIPEC recommendation, which would cost less money, wouldn't need these gantries?
It's to drop tolls and do more borrowing.
Yes, and the argument was, well, if we do it that way, Rhode Island would have to pay 100%. But if we do tolling, then people outside of Rhode Island will pay 60% of the cost. Now, you can decide whether or not that makes any sense to get your neighbor to pay for your problems. But if you can do that to your neighbor will soon do it to you. If Connecticut, the first time they put up a toll, unlike taxing their citizens of their income, which only Connecticut people would be participating in, truckers from Texas and Rhode Island and Massachusetts would be going over Connecticut tolls. So Connecticut could say the same thing. Tolls are wonderful because we're going to raise revenue at the expense of other states. And when everybody starts doing it, it gets to be a little messy.
A lot of strong points from the CEO of the Ocean State Job Lot, Marc Perlman. We're going to get the response from the other side. Commerce Secretary Stefan Pryor joins us on the second half of Newsmakers. Welcome back to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. To my right, WPRI.com reporter Ted Nesi, our guest on the second half, and we're talking roadworks, or as you may know it, the truck toll legislation. Our guest is Commerce Secretary Stefan Pryor. Mr. Secretary, welcome back to the program. Good to have you.
Thank you, Tim, and Ted. Thank you.
So you just heard CEO of the Ocean State Job Lot, Marc Perlman. He joined us on the first half. I want you to answer a yes or no question. Will the toll plan impact Rhode Island Job Lot's bottom line? Yes or no?
I think yes, and positively. I think that it will impact Job Lot and other major employers positively. Look, first of all, let's talk about the risk of not doing roadworks. We have among the worst roads and bridges in the country, by some key indicators, the worst bridges in the United States. God forbid we should have a catastrophic impact upon a bridge and a problem with our roadways. We would vastly impact the economy. I know that Job Lot and all the other employers of the state want to avoid safety issues, and certainly the out there concern about a catastrophic concern. But beyond that, our image as a state, we are last on roads and bridges. We've been irresponsible over decades in the way we've maintained our infrastructure. We need to get off of these lists where we're the worst in the country and create a positive business environment that supports companies like Job Lot by starting to rise on these lists and indeed top the lists. We're starting to get there on key indicators.
Mark's not going to argue that. He said all the same things you just said on the first half of the program. But is everything that you want to do going to offset, what did he say, $9 to $10 million to his business they calculated over 10 years? It's going to offset that.
Well, I haven't seen Mark's precise estimates. I've heard some speculation that the numbers are higher, they're lower, including that they're lower. But look, Marc knows his business best. There have been, over the years, millions of dollars of investment in the infrastructure surrounding Job Lot, in North Kingstown, in the bridge infrastructure and road infrastructure leading to that facility, millions of dollars, even tens of millions of dollars to clean and clear the land upon which Job Lot's facility is built. These are monies from the state. There is an application in, as Marc has expressed publicly, for more public investment in an expansion in the facility. Rhode Island has invested in companies like Job Lot, and we're going to continue to do so. In addition, we feel that this road and bridge package, Roadworks, it's going to make us more competitive because we need to have certainty for distributors and truckers that when they travel through Rhode Island, we don't have the worst roads and bridges, that there aren't going to be, let's not talk about the catastrophic, which is an out there concern. Let's talk about the routine construction work that delays trucks. That hits the bottom line of businesses. We've got to avoid those problems, and we've got to keep investing in the right way in Rhode Island business.
Marc Perlman made a very interesting point, though. He said, Rhode Island will be an outlier by tolling only trucks. And few people have talked more than Gina Raimondo over the years about the need for Rhode Island to avoid fiscal policy where we are, as Rhode Island, will be an outlier. We'll be doing things differently from other states. I mean, U.S. Commerce Secretary, the Brookings report that you have that you're looking at talks about the need to standardize with other states. How do you respond to that?
Let me talk about another way in which we're an outlier. From Maryland to Maine, almost every state has tolling. Most states greater tolling, greater amounts than we do.
But they do make cars pay.
We're right. An outlier. Well, that doesn't make a difference as to comparisons for trucks. That makes no difference. One state that hasn't had tolling is Connecticut. You may have seen very recently they talked about congestion pricing. That means tolls, and that means cars, by the way. In Rhode Island, what we've done is we've created a program under this governor, under this General Assembly that's smart, that looks at, the larger trucks do as pertains to vehicle caused damage, cause the vast majority of the damage. So it makes sense for there to be a contribution. But look, what has happened in this recent round of dialogue with the General Assembly? There's been the recognition that new federal funds have come to the table. So we've spread the burden well beyond just truckers flowing through Rhode Island to the American taxpayer and drawn upon the new federal funds. That was a very smart move. It significantly lowered the debt burden, the amount of debt to be issued. It actually halved it. It lowered the per vehicle fee to $20 from what was potentially going to be $30. This is an even smarter plan, less burden on trucks, and it is fair because look, up and down the eastern seaboard, trucks are making contributions to other states while our roads and bridges are suffering and our business environment is being impacted.
One thing the administration, or that hasn't been discussed a lot, the administration has a lot of power in the coming year and after that over how many gantries and where they're actually put, and actually how much toll revenue is actually brought in. I know the estimate's been $45 million, but since the bond money is no longer tied to the toll revenue, you have a lot of flexibility there. Is it possible we could see significantly less tolling in the final version of this plan when the administration finishes it?
I leave that to the transportation and the finance experts. My domain is commerce, and what I can tell you is listen to Lori White of the Greater Providence Chamber of Commerce and the other stakeholders in business who I listen to every day. They're saying infrastructure that is reliable, that is dependable, that isn't going to have a construction delay or even worse, a collapse. That's essential to the economy. Lori has cited surveys that show that it's the #1 concern of business. We hear all the time that the reliability of our business environment is critical. On other fronts, we're also improving the business environment. In one fell swoop, we eliminated the energy tax on business in the last budget. There's no longer an energy tax for businesses in Rhode Island. We're rising into the top of the ranks. We are taking aim at the unemployment insurance tax now and lowering burden on businesses because we've seen surpluses in that program. And we're doing so, we're lowering the UI tax on businesses while maintaining the benefits level for individuals. That's one of the places we do worst in the country. Folks, we've got to increase our rankings on things where we're doing terribly, where we're doing the worst of, like on roads and bridges. And we've got to increase where we're doing well. We must be at the top of the ranks on energy costs, on energy taxes on businesses, because we don't have a tax anymore. We're doing better on innovation. We just jumped on a Bloomberg ranking above New York and Texas.
I can't let you filibuster.
On innovation. And this one's very important. I have to do one more important one. We're one of the most attractive places in America. Present speaker excluded. We just got named one of the most attractive environments for the look of human beings.
All right.
In Providence, Rhode Island.
Okay, yeah, all right.
How about that? We're doing well.
All right. So clearly, you're discussing these possible incentives for the trucking industry.
Yes.
Marc Perlman alluded to that. What are you looking at? What could you provide them?
The incentives conversation is a conversation that's embedded in a larger discussion about how to invest in industry and how to invest in our economy in Rhode Island. We should note that the governor proposes to make a $70 million investment in Quonset, in our port of Davisville, for the importation of automobiles and port infrastructure in that domain. We're looking at ways of lowering business costs like UI. I've just referenced the lowering of the unemployment insurance tax. We are going to look in the context of that broad economic development picture at distribution, warehousing, manufacturing, trucking, and what ways would make most sense for investment. That conversation is yet to evolve, and we've got to put a package together. I will tell you that we're also looking at key nodes. I've already referenced Quonset. It's a very important infrastructure cluster in our state for multiple purposes, job lot, port, and otherwise. Provport is an important node as well, Providence's port.
So we have just a couple of minutes left.
So we're going to look at those when we look at the package.
We have the Commerce Secretary sitting here at the table. We just saw GE go up to Massachusetts. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you if we had any other businesses coming to Rhode Island, hints of anything else, any positive signs?
We do. We're very pleased that in the very near future we will be able to say more about this transaction, but there's an Attleboro, Massachusetts company called Trade Area Systems. Trade Area Systems has about 20 jobs up in Attleboro. They provide software solutions and technology for real estate site selectors, for real estate professionals, for brokers. That's what they do for a living. They're going to move those jobs to Rhode Island, and they're going to expand their number of jobs here in Rhode Island. They're availing themselves of our new Qualified Jobs Incentive Act, Representative Shikarshi's bill, and our new measures on jobs incentives. So that's going to be announced by Governor Raimondo, Speaker Mattiello, and Senate President Paiva-Weed very soon in greater detail, and it'll go through our Commerce Board. But we're very pleased that a company is moving from Massachusetts to Rhode Island. And what's exciting is that the company's talking about the environment in Rhode Island, the vibrancy of our community, the tech community in particular, and these are site selectors that they service. This company works with real estate professionals, so it's going to be of a greater likelihood that when they hold a conference, regarding selecting sites for real estate projects, including employers, they might be more frequently likely to hold it in Rhode Island.
30 seconds.
So these are positive developments.
30 seconds. Tim referenced GE. Are you still in talks with GE about other jobs potentially coming to Rhode Island?
We are actively in talks with GE. We talked with GE as recently as yesterday. There's an active conversation about business units that might make sense in Rhode Island. We're very pleased with the rapport we've developed with them, and there are types of jobs and types of business operations we think would be terrific fits here. You know, look, we've got to do 1,000 of these conversations with 1,000 companies in order to land one. We're not betting on just one, but we're very pleased with GE, and with Trade Area Systems, we think that one's going to move through our process in a matter of days.
Commerce Secretary Stefan Pryor, thank you for joining us. And my thanks to Marc Perlman, the CEO of Rhode Island Ocean State Job Lot. He was on the first half. If you missed it, it's online, WPRI.com. For Ted Nesi, I'm Tim White. We'll see you next week on Newsmakers.